I wanted to make a movie before I was 30. I think all photographers want to make movies. I don't know about, I mean, today everybody's making movies. But in those days, I guess you felt photography was still and movies moved. So the natural step from being a still photographer, a working still photographer, is that I'm going to make a movie. I was part of that genre. I was trained as an art director, and when I was an art director for Little Fashion magazine, and began to carry a camera around everywhere. I had never thought of doing it professionally. I always wanted it as a hobby. It was something personal, and it gave me kind of identity. Well, have a camera in my hand to record whatever was around me, if I so wished. I even carried my little contacts all the way to Japan and throughout my army time. And when I came out, I thought of becoming an art director again, or a photographer. I didn't have any interest in motion picture at the time. I got intrigued with doing photography. This art director that I had worked for before I went in the army had become the head art director of a small agency which had an advertising account called Smirnoff Vodka, and they wanted to do something a little bit different. So I got to do tests, and when the campaign got approved, it turned out that I got a chance to shoot the campaign, which led me into photography as a profession. I was just basically a photographer who wanted to make a movie, and before he was 30. I love movies. High Noon, All the King's Men. There are certain movies that I just love. Not that jazz is anything like them. It's an unusual film because it's like still photography. I think the movie is very much that way. It's like moving still pictures. With music, music's built in, so we didn't have to orchestrate. I had known a wonderful girl named Jean Stein, whose father owned MCA at the time, Music Corporation of America. And she was friends with a woman named Elaine Laurelot, who was the founder of the Newport Jazz Festival, started it. And one afternoon, visiting her, just listening, I put together that they were putting on a jazz festival in Newport, and intrigued with the combination of jazz and Newport, kind of rich and poor. It just struck me that I'd make a wonderful little short, and which turned out to be a full-length feature.
We have found a very lovely lady here, and I think that she is the one person who is really responsible for this jazz festival, and it's Elaine Laurelot. How are you tonight, Elaine?
Very well, thank you.
Are you pleased with what you see tonight?
I'm very happy.
No, actually, I think we're very fortunate. There's no rain, and I brought along a heavy leather coat, and I don't think I'm going to need it at all.
No, I don't think so either. I have a sweater that I've tucked away in my bag.
Going up to Newport was like going into a magical world of the very rich. Elaine Laurelot lived in that area with all the mansions. She was part of the rich. And just going through those big mansions like the Breakers and places where Vanderbilt were brought up. And so it was everything I wasn't. I was a poor kid in Brooklyn. So I loved seeing all those places. The jazz brought some reality to the project. And even though I was in a jazz film, I loved the music.
Guitar, Sal Salvador.
place in the back in a yard behind a high school, which was very disturbing to me when I first went up there, because I had imagined Woodstock, even though it was 10 years earlier. I imagined large green lawns with people and trees and music playing and so on. And I was totally disappointed when I saw where it was going to take place. And actually, I was on a small plane coming back. I decided I was not going to do the movie because there was nothing really to shoot that interested me. It was not what I thought of in my mind. And I was sitting next to a guy named Charlie McWhorter on the plane, who was a lawyer, and he got talking to me. He said, what were we doing in Newport? So I told him that I'd come up to look at a location for a movie I was thinking of doing on the Newport Jazz Festival, but I decided not to do it. He said, why? I said, because it's just too difficult. He said, no, you must make this movie. And we were flying in the clouds at the time, and I felt this kind of force, and I changed my mind. I decided to go ahead with it because my first instincts many times are the ones I follow, even though it was difficult. We tried to devise a story, but I wasn't equipped to produce a story. We tried, and after the first scene with the cat, which ran off, I realized that I just wasn't able to do that, so I stuck to the festival, to the music, and interpret that with my camera. I think the problem we had with the first script is just wasn't good enough. It didn't make any sense, because I'm not a writer, I'm a photographer. So I thought we could improvise it. I thought we could create a love story. It was about a little boy who lived there, basically people in the area, and they go to the festival. But it didn't have conflict enough. It wasn't a real script. So I had this guy who was the writer, actually, was also an actor, and this girl was very beautiful that I was going with, and I thought they could be the subject of this love story. And I was going to do it improvisational in the French genre. The mistake I made with that is I rehearsed it. And the rehearsal was great. But after that, the passion that they had for each other was gone. So when we set up the cameras, there was nothing to shoot because we didn't have a script. So I think if you're going to make a movie, it helps to have a script or something happening. In this case, we had an event and it didn't need a script. The event went on. We just shot what we could. I got over it. In fact, I had my experience in the Army with the IMO, so I shot a lot of footage with my IMO, figuring that improvisational thing would fit in with the music, which was also a great deal improvisational. I think we started to shoot either Friday morning or Saturday morning. First thing we shot was Jimmy Giuffre, and I shot with my long lens, which is the opening scene. And as I was shooting, I got so excited with what was going on that in my mind I began to see all the seagulls flying around as I was shooting the footage, because he had a beige suit on and I could see dissolving in seagulls and stuff. So I decided that after I finished shooting that day, the next morning we'd get up early, go down to the boat area and shoot seagulls. When we got there were no seagulls. And I looked in the water and I saw these strange colored reflections. So I said, let's shoot that. And that's what we put to the Jimmy Giuffre opening. It's pretty much how it happened.
Jimmy Jufrey, Bob Brookmeyer, Jim Hall.
Decided we were going to do the movie. I went to Columbia Records, which George Avakian was head of, to ask them if they would record all the sound for the festival, where usually each company recorded their own artists. My idea was to have Columbia record the whole thing and give snippets or pieces to individual companies. George Avakian was an authority on jazz, I guess, or on music, and George was the guy I went to see, and he got intrigued with the fact that I wanted to do this. So he was very important in the making of the movie because he knew which songs we could clear, and those are the ones that we decided to record. He was in the pit, you might say, and when an artist came on stage, we didn't exactly know what they were going to play. So he would give us a sign, let's do this one, and we turned the cameras on. I'd never heard Anita O'Day. The only person I had heard was Chico Hamilton. We did rely a lot on George to what we could clear, and maybe there was a little influence by which artists belonged to Columbia. I'm not sure. Who we shot was determined by George Avakian. His brother Aram was probably the most experienced filmmaker on the set. What Aram was a wonderful editor. George, who knew which songs we can clear, was very helpful, and Aram, being down in the pit with his brother, was able to speak to the different cameras to cover different parts. There is this controversy that still lives with the Avakians. Aram died a number of years ago, but his brother carries on his legend. The first opening shot of the story was a scene with a cat, and we set up with it, and as soon as we pointed a camera at the cat ran off, and Aram and others spent the whole day looking for the cat. I thought we could wing it and do improvisational even with a story. I was wrong. We couldn't do that. That's what they call about fiasco. It wasn't fiasco, it was that we just couldn't do the story. We didn't have a script that was makeable. The movie is a photography and film with music, and that was built in. This idea came along that I felt I could handle, because it wasn't a real movie like a script. It was a kind of form of a documentary, and it had a lot to do with photography. And it was something that I'd never seen before, and it just intrigued me. Aram was a great editor, and George was a great musical director. We gave them credit for that, there's no question about it. But they did not direct the movie. I don't know about the word direct, but I certainly shot most of it, and all the ideas are things I felt should be done, and I just go out and do them. And all the ideas that make it what it is are my ideas. I shot the cups from a Piper Cub with an Arriflex hanging out of the airplane. The cross-cutting of Reflections with Jimmy Jufrey. I shot all the scenes in the audience, which is all still photography, just poking around. But I was still decided what went in and what didn't go in. The controversy grew out of the fact that maybe I was just too improvisational for most people's way of seeing or making movies. The Avakians were very helpful to me. They didn't produce the film, I produced the film. George was finished after the festival was over. We never spoke to him very much. Aram was in the editing room for a long time, and I used to pay his salary every week out of the money I earned shooting still photos. And when he had something ready, we'd come screen it. And if I liked it, we put it in. If I didn't like it, we'd throw it out. For instance, the footage of the girl chewing gum with the red sweater, Aram wanted to cut that up in a lot of pieces and cut back to it. And I said, that's crazy. This is one piece of film. There was no point to cut it at all. Just throw it in. So it's my film. It's a documentary, and it has all the elements of still photography. When you shoot what you see. But the Avakians were essential elements in bringing it to the screen because they had the experience. I just had desire. I think doing a festival is probably an immense task. And the fact that we were allowed to bring our cameras in was interesting. There were 5 cameras, 1 long shot, mine, which was the close-up camera, and then 2 or 3, there was even somebody with an IMO that poked around. We also had Bruce Davidson, the photographer, shooting still pictures. George Wein was in charge of everything, and since the lighting that the festival used was much too low for photography, I asked George Wein if I could light the festival for them, that we pay for that part, which gave us the opportunity to put enough light so we could shoot. It was like discovering gold while we were shooting. Well, we actually shot 80,000 feet. We used telephoto lenses. I adapted some of the long lenses that I use in my still photography. Like I had a 180 sonar lens, which I use for a lot of still pictures. So I adapted that to the Ariflex, which made a wonderful look because you had to get a close-up, even though you weren't in front of the person, and gave a kind of living quality to the footage, I thought.
I ain't mad at you, pretty lady. I ain't mad at you now. I ain't mad at you. Well, don't be mad at me. I ain't mad at you. Won't change the way you do. For this morning, I ain't mad.
I think the style we used was pretty much ideas that I employed to hide the kind of tackiness of the stand and the cheap chairs and so on. And we try to make it much more glamorous. And by shooting into the lights, which was something I did in still photography, because I did a lot of pictures at sunset, I tried to, in a sense, to recreate the look of my still photography into the movie. That has become a real style that was picked up and admired by lots of directors. We made it seem bigger than it really is. I don't think it's quite Ben-Hur, and there weren't dollies. I don't think we had any dollies. But in my schedule, having the opportunity to make a movie in a weekend was a big advantage. It was not a feature film. We needed cutaways from the festival, because we mainly had footage of performances and people in the audience. And we needed a relief, like a break. So we devised shooting things that we didn't shoot that went on around Newport, like parties and people dancing on roofs. That we found a similar place in Long Island, I think it was Bayville or something, and we set that up to fill out the cutaways, you might say. We try to stay back, not get in the way of the people performing, and use long lenses and things like that. But there's something improvisational and real about the performances. So getting it on film with sound at that time was very exciting, because that's before videotape, and the whole syncing process was very complex, because we had 5 cameras rolling at sometimes, and to sync them all up to the picture was complicated. It took 6 months in the editing room to find the sync to all the different cameras. Fortunately, the film that we did have was so magnificent, because it was on 35mm Kodak color negative, that it just jumped off the screen when we screened it. We'd never seen anything like that before.
Around the Frisco Bay, all over St. Louis, way down in New Orleans, all the cats wanna dance with sweet little 16, sweet little 16. She got the grown-up blues, tight dresses and lipstick, sporting them high heel shoes. Oh, but tomorrow morning she'll have to change her train and be sweet 16 and back in class again.
I started shooting the film with no financing. I was just financing it myself out of my still photography. We didn't clear the songs or the stars before. We just shot. And after the movie was finished, we went to the individual agents to get permissions. We had no permissions other than from the festival. So we really had to get permissions of like Joe Glazer, who was Louis Armstrong's agent, who came to a screening and showed him the footage, and he says, it's great footage. And we made a price. And actually, Louis was the most expensive part of the movie. And at one point, we were going to leave it out because we didn't have enough money. Louis Armstrong's big name, still is. He's probably the biggest known star in the movie. And even though we were having a hard time trying to figure out how to pay the $25,000 that they asked, I do think he is very important as a part of the film because he's the most important jazz artist there is in history. In 15, I was a photographer. I decided that making movies was a very painful and difficult process, and I didn't really want to give up my photography, which I would have had to devote myself totally to movies. I decided to stick with photography, the elements that I brought to film through my photography, the use of long lenses and things like that had not been seen prior in documentary films or in jazz film. My impression of jazz was kind of something downstairs in a dark room. Usually jazz films are all black and white, and kind of depressing in little downstairs nightclubs. This brought jazz out into the sun, and it was different.
She can't get out unless this gal has never read. Just learned her, just learned her. Sweet Georgia Brown.
1958 was a very up period in which things were on a positive note, certainly very different than today. And one of the things in the movie was the mixture of black and white people in the audience, which at the time was controversial. In fact, we were told that this movie could never be released in the South at that time, because that's before a lot of things. This movie was made before the Beatles. It was 10 years before Woodstock. So we just felt it was a very positive period, and certainly in Newport it was very progressive in the way people thought. So it was a sunny day. That was what was going on. We had cameras and film, and we shot.
All right, just you make me feel like I'm a star.
I guess the only kind of problems that I had was when Mahalia Jackson was going to sing the Lord's Prayer, which was the end of Saturday night, George said, no cameras. And I said to my cameraman, let's roll it. It was just too wonderful to miss. In fact, if you listen real carefully on the track, you can hear the camera rolling under her voice, or some of the cameras. We had our problems, but in the end, we were able to put it all together.
And forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. Lord, lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For